rising in the air. There's a feeling so strong. It's time to light the fire, like a bright shining light. Love, getting more out of life. Love, sharing time with friends, feeling so strong.
Hello, welcome to the House of Wellness. I'm Luke Darcy and I'm here alongside the extremely recognisable Joe Stanley.
I wouldn't say that, Darcy. When I get stopped in the street, people say, look, it's Fifi Box. I know you had a similar experience, Darcy.
You don't look like anything like Fifi Box, but I occasionally get mistaken for Cam Mooney, who was an ex-AFL player. Good-looking rooster, by the way.
Yeah, I actually can see that.
Can you say
that happens
there's a
similarity.
bit? But it famously happened. I work on Saturday night footy. We go down to the rooms, we interview the current players, and one of them actually called me Moons live on air, Joe, which was a memorable moment. Well deserving. Congratulations.
Thanks, Moons. Thanks for the chat. Appreciate it.
Good on you, James. Good stuff. Thank you, mate. And well played to James Stewart. I'm pretty sure he just called me Cameron Mooney, James Stewart.
I didn't want to correct him, Big Moons, but we got to go to what are we doing now, Moons?
That is as funny as it gets.
Oh, that is a shocker.
It was maybe as embarrassing for me as for James Stewart, who's a great young player, by the way, got on to great things. Now, I reckon I'm pretty good at faces, but terrible at remembering people's names, Joe.
Well, there's a condition called prosopagnosia, or face blindness, where people can struggle to recognise familiar faces, and as many as 1 in 50 people have it to some degree.
And then there's the opposite end of that spectrum, Joe, where people are super recognisers. They have superior facial recognition skills than the rest of us and can memorise and recall thousands of faces.
Well, the science behind facial recognition is pretty new. It only really started to be explored in the early 2000s, and since then, super recognisers have been recruited to help security and law enforcement agencies around the world.
It's attracted a lot of interest, including researchers at the University of New South Wales, who are investigating exactly what makes a face stand out in the crowd.
Melbourne's David Screech Powell has always had a knack for remembering faces.
Yeah, I've always been able to recognise family members, distant family members that I haven't seen, or school people, primary school kids growing up, like 20 years later. My wife's always picking up on me picking out people from the crowd. I would walk past and I'd say, oh, well, that's so-and-so. She's always astounded as to the fact that I can pick people out. The faces, I'll never forget, and it's an instant reaction to their face. It's like I have to think about, oh, that's that person. There you are. You know, what are you doing here?
David never thought much of his handy skill until he stumbled upon a short online quiz.
I came across a test that was a super recogniser test. I didn't know what it was at the time. I took the test and it was a face matching test.
It was through acing this test that David ended up on the radar of University of New South Wales cognitive scientist Dr. James Dunn, a lead researcher in the relatively new scientific field of face recognition.
Super recognisers essentially are just people who are gifted at face recognition. So there are people, just like ordinary people like you and I, who seem to do better at remembering faces than most people, and sometimes after really brief encounters. So we seem to think that super recognisers might make up about 1 to 2% of the population based on the current scientific understanding. We think it's largely genetic and not something that can be acquired through training or experience. And so we're trying to understand what makes them so special, with the idea that it might help us understand expertise in general, what makes some people naturally gifted on some abilities than others.
Through their free online test, UNSW have tracked down a large cohort of people just like David, allowing Dr. Dunn to closely examine how super recognisers observe and recall faces.
So using this technology, we can see the world through the eyes of a super recogniser. So we have this forward-facing camera that sees the world as they see it. And then on the inside, we have 2 infrared cameras that point towards the eye so we can see where they're looking in their environment. It seems that most people are drawn to the eyes, that people naturally spend a lot of time attending to the eyes. It's a very important cue for attention and social cue. But we also know that super recognisers also explore the face a little bit more than the ordinary person. So they seem to look at other features of the face. They might notice a very distinguished feature. For example, there might be a unique ears or a facial shape, and they seem to be tuning into those details a little bit better than most people as well.
some part of the brain, some part of me is always scanning for a familiar face in the crowd, and every face is very different. Some people have really thick eyebrows, some people have eye shapes that are different, ears, noses slant to the side, lips. So everyone's face is very different, and I guess the aspect of my ability is I pick up on those little subtle differences. So twins as well. Twins, we can spot the difference of twins. I don't see it as a superpower as such. I just see it as something I can do every day, really. I don't look at it as like special, but it is cool to have because you can always spot the difference or see something before anyone else or react differently.
David may not consider it a superpower, but people with his skill have been called on to help fight crime. Police forces in the UK and Germany have successfully used super recognisers to identify criminals in CCTV footage.
Artificial intelligence technology for face recognition has come a long way in recent years. And so the accuracy on those measures have gotten really, really good. But they're only really good in very particular circumstances. So, for example, SmartGate at the border, where you have a camera situated at a certain distance, you know the lighting conditions, that technology is very, very good under those circumstances and can make a large number of decisions highly accurately. But when you deal with situations with like CCTV footage, or when you're out in the normal environment where lighting and angles and stuff aren't so good, in those situations, AI is not doing so well, and super recognizers seem to outperform those technology there.
We've done a lot of testing. We've proven we can do what we can do, and I think, yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to be a part of any help to find missing people or chase down criminals. Yeah, that'd be great.
To find out if you're a super or just regular recogniser, you can take the University of New South Wales free online test. Head to the website if you're keen to see if you're one of the 1% to 2% of the population.
Now, did you try it yet, Jo?
I don't need to do it. I am terrible. I can't recognise people when they're wearing sunnies. And if you're wearing sunnies and a mask, oh my gosh, it's been a bad 2 years, let me tell you. Well, face recognition technology has been used to identify terrorists and criminals, but there's still little to no regulation of how else it's being used, including by government and law enforcement agencies. Big companies like IBM and Microsoft have even put a halt on selling this technology due to some concerns.
And I get the concern with that, Jo. Now, we've given up a lot of our own personal information. When you grew up as kids, the family photo album was there in your home and it was shared with family members. Now we share that with everyone, isn't it? So sophistication online and the thought of your own digital security is probably something we should think a lot about.
Well, the thought we can't hide anywhere on the planet is a bit of a worry. Maybe face masks were good for that too.
Well, from recognising faces to knowing if you're at risk of having a heart attack, two of the country's top heart specialists join us next, right here on the House of Wellness. Fair to say everyone was shocked at the recent high-profile deaths of much-loved Australian cricket legend Shane Warne and politician Kimberley Kitching, who were both just 52 when they died suddenly from heart-related issues.
Yeah, it certainly made all of us sit up and take notice of our own health and wonder if we take particularly heart health for granted. Perhaps, if we're forewarned, more tragedies like Shane and Kimberley can be avoided.
As we get older, the GP visits and tests we need to take become more regular, Jo. A common one we're all used to is that slow-squeezing Velcro sleeve that's wrapped around your arm to take your blood pressure. It feels weird, but what is it actually doing?
There's about 5 litres of blood in the adult body, which is a lot of liquid pumping around the arteries. That's where blood pressure comes in, and the inflatable sleeve. So how does that work? The sound the doctor is listening for as the sleeve deflates is your systolic blood pressure. That's the force on the blood vessels when your heart pushes blood out. The point where the noise stops is the diastolic pressure, the pressure on the arteries between heartbeats. These two magic numbers give your overall blood pressure. And if you're pretty healthy, that should be below 120 and below 80. If either of those numbers are up, you could have high blood pressure. More than 1/3 of Aussies over the age of 18 have high blood pressure and don't know it. That's because there's often no symptoms. Left unchecked, it can lead to serious health problems, which is a very good reason to get your blood pressure checked regularly. It's painless, quick, and might save your life.
Regular blood pressure checks are easy to do, but what other tests are there to check on heart health, Joe? Well, here to tell us are not one, but we're very grateful to have two of Australia's top cardiologists. Please welcome Professor Rick Harper and Dr Brett Forge. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
I might start with you, Rick. The tragic deaths of Shane Warne, Australian cricketing legend, and the politician Kimberley Kitchen in recent times have brought heart health to the forefront of everyone's minds, especially those in that age bracket around 50s. Are heart episodes like this generally avoidable?
Heart attacks only occur if you have plaque in your coronary artery. If you don't have plaque, you don't get a heart attack. And many people, particularly if they lead a healthy lifestyle, never develop coronary plaque. But many do, and many are unaware they have coronary plaque. And unfortunately, the first manifestation of a coronary plaque in some people can be a fatal heart attack. The good news is that there are very effective treatments to prevent that from happening. So we strongly believe that people at risk should find out whether they've got coronary plaque, and if they have, to take these preventative measures. Doing so may add many years to their life.
So, Brett, often a person has no symptoms, there's no warning, and then suddenly they have a heart attack. How common is that, and how preventable?
At least 30% of the first presentations are sudden death. And coronary death is the commonest cause of death in Australia. There's 48 people die every day in Australia from coronary disease. For comparison, for breast cancer, it's 8 or 9 women die. Prostate cancer, it's 10. So it's by far the most important and significant cause of death.
So where do you start in assessing a person's risk?
What we've done for many years has been based on the Framingham study, which looks at risk factors. I actually developed a calculator to do this about 25 years ago. You'd put in things like the age and the gender and the smoking, blood pressure, diabetes and hypertension, and then you could calculate the risk, the probability of them having a cardiac event. From that process, we use that as a basis for treating, advising lifestyle changes, and if they fail, then medication. But the trouble with that was it's just a risk assessment. It's like saying that horse is 2 to 1. It means may or may not come in. So what has been a spectacular development has been the development of these new tests, CT coronary calcium score and CT coronary angiography. So a CT coronary calcium score actually looks at calcium, measures calcium in coronary arteries, and calcium shouldn't be there. It only occurs when there's been atherosclerosis or plaque building up in the artery, which then leads to scarring and healing, and that shows up as a significant score.
Is plaque cholesterol?
Yes, yeah. So if you have excess cholesterol in your blood for long periods of time, it tends to be scavenged by certain cells in the circulation called macrophages, and it stores it away in your coronary arteries, and that causes the inflammation inside the artery, which then, if the inflammation spreads and ulcerates through the wall of the artery, you get what Rick was explaining. Suddenly you get a development of a rupture of a plaque, which may lead to a blood clot, which may block the artery.
So do you think that a lot of people have assumed knowledge about their heart in as much as they think that because they're fit, they're young, relatively, that they're at no risk?
Oh, yes. Well, this actually, what got me interested in this was the middle-aged men in Lycra who, they go out, they're fit, and they probably never smoked, and they just think they're Superman, and they're, racking up mountain climbs and things, and they just suddenly drop dead. So they don't know. They have no symptoms, and particularly men are very poor at sort of judging their risk. So there's no way you can really predict it. Obviously, things like family history are important, but they need to have a proper assessment, which is cheap and painless and can tell them whether they're at risk or not.
Rick, is it too simplistic to describe heart disease and heart attacks as a lifestyle issue? And if so, what can we do in our lifestyle to prevent getting the situation where we're at risk?
It is predominantly a lifestyle issue. And if you have a healthy lifestyle, regular exercise, and such as brisk walking, for example, you've got control of your blood pressure and you don't smoke, and importantly, if you have a sense of self-purpose and self-worthiness, all these factors are helpful in preventing plaque build-up. But the main factor is if you have a high level of the bad cholesterol, the LDL cholesterol. That's probably the most important factor, and the most important factor to treat in people with plaque to prevent the plaques developing a heart attack.
Fascinated that you're talking about sense of purpose and lifestyle and community and connection as being a preventative treatment. I I think that makes perfect sense to me, and I think we're understanding more about that. It's probably not a language you'd expect from your cardiologist in the past. I mean, you've been doing this for your whole life. I mean, how important are those measures? I
think they're very important. People that do have a sense of self-worth, such as politicians, for example, even if it may not be earned, have a low incidence of heart attack. But people who are out of work, feel they can't support their family, they have a much higher incidence of heart attack. The demographics of the National Heart Foundation have clearly shown that.
Can you explain the tests to us, Rick?
The test basically involves just under a CT scan to look at the calcium. It's a bit like having a chest X-ray. And if there's calcium present, as Brett said, in the coronary arteries, you must have plaque. And the score indicates how widespread the plaque is. So if you have a low score, you may have very little plaque. If you have a high score, you may have a lot of plaque. And if you have a high score, then the next step is often an exercise test to see if the heart's under strain as a result of that plaque build-up. If it's under strain, they're the sort of people that might benefit from bypass surgery or a stenting procedure. But the important thing, particularly the higher the score, the more important it is to take all these factors into account, and in particular to get your LDL cholesterol below the Heart Foundation target level of 1.8. And that's difficult to do on diet alone. You basically need a statin. And for example, all patients in Australia who've had a heart attack or have had bypass surgery or have had stents, they're all put on a statin medication, and we know that protects them from further heart attacks.
Brett, you look like you've got something you want to add to...
Well, Rick is predicting that I'm going to say this, I think, but it's worth pointing out that even those that do have stress or strain or angina, there's no evidence that stenting or surgery actually prolongs life or prevents heart attacks. It certainly improves symptoms, but you're still back to the same thing. Lifestyle factors, first, second and third, and aggressive cholesterol lowering is what works.
And do you think these tests are ordered regularly enough?
No, definitely not. And Rick mentioned, like, we still get people sent to us for stress tests because they're going to start cycling or something. Much, much better to do a CT calcium because, as Rick said, they could have really bad disease and you're not going to pick it up. You'll only pick it up if they've got a significant blockage which might be causing symptoms. So I think we'd both argue strongly that at least CT coronary calcium should be made available. It's not on Medicare, and I think that makes both doctors and patients feel it's not an accepted test. But widespread use of it should be encouraged in all but the people who are very low risk who don't need it. So probably 85% of the population at some stage, probably in men starting 45 and women maybe starting 5 years later, should be available to everyone. And it would save a huge amount of lives.
Rick and Brett, we appreciate you joining us today in the House of Wellness. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
So, Jo, there's a story that's grabbed my attention recently. Now, we talk a lot about bees on the House of Wellness, and we actually have a hive right here on the set, so we get plenty of opportunities to watch them in action.
Oh, we love these little guys. They're so fascinating as they work, and, sometimes they kind of escape and wander around here on the floor. They're really beautiful. Some don't quite make it, unfortunately.
They can actually go a fair bit further than just from the hive to us here. The average distance bees fly is about 1 kilometre, but if they have to, they can go as far as 8 kilometres, which is a pretty fair effort for a little bee.
Oh, it's unbelievable. You think about those little wings flapping at such an incredible speed. They must be very tired after zipping out for a few hours to the next suburb. How do they do that?
Which brings me, Jo, to the story. So we know bees are integral to the food chain. They pollinate 1 in 3 pieces of the food that we eat, and sometimes they need some help to get to where they're needed to keep that process going.
So each season, beehives are trucked around the country to pollinate the nation's food crops, meaning COVID border closures and other restrictions hit the bee industry like everyone else.
The queen bees are also bred and sent all over the country to start hives. Incredibly, they're sent through the postal system, which didn't work so well during COVID with the delays with Australia Post.
So, if you're a beekeeper intent on getting your queen to her destination safely, what would you do?
Queen bees are probably the most important. They are absolutely vital to a hive. The queen bee is the only bee that can reproduce in a hive. So she's the one that lays the eggs and really grows the hive and helps it to survive. So without her, that colony would be nothing. Unfortunately, there are circumstances where the queen dies off or she just can't produce the way that she used to produce. And so beekeepers do sometimes rely on queen bee breeders to provide great quality queens into their hives. And often they don't live in close proximity. So we do need to be able to transport queen bees between the breeder and the beekeeper.
Getting from A to B for queen bees has traditionally involved travelling via post. But if you've ever waited too long for a parcel, you'll understand the issue facing queen bee breeders and beekeepers.
Whilst the postal system is great, there are definitely a few challenges that route does face. So there is a bit of congestion at different times of the year, which means that the bees are in transit for longer. They can often suffer from things like dehydration or suffer from heat. And so we need to make sure that they do get transitioned in comfort so that they survive. When we heard about the challenges that the bee industry was facing with regards to transporting queen bees, we had an idea and Bee Honey enlisted the help of Silvertop Taxi to bring it to life. So the Queen Bee Chariot is exactly as it sounds. It is a regal transport service for queen bees. There are probably three main benefits of transporting by taxi. The first is that we can pick them up sooner. The second is that they get there a little bit quicker. And the third is that it can be air conditioned. So they are travelling in luxury and full comfort, which ensures their safety and security. One of the trips that we did was from Glenrowan all the way to Traralgon. So it's about 4.5 hours and clocks close to 400 kilometres. So you can imagine that these taxis clocked up close to 1,000 kilometres over the trial trips that we did. But there's no distance too far to get the queen from the breeder to the new beehive. The driver that we worked with, his name was Chico, and he's worked for Silvertop for a really long time. And he said to us that he's transported many famous people before, but he's never transported royalty. We did our first trip where we transported the queen bee with what we call a nucleus colony. So that basically means that the queen bee is travelling not only in luxury, but she's got her own bees in tow in the back. So the bees did not have to pay flagfall. It was a fairly expensive trip. It was about $830 for our first trip. We're so pleased that we could transport 10 queen bees to new homes. We like to think of them as producing amazing honey, and they're incredible at that, but really their pollinating ability is critical to our food security. So we've got to protect them. So if it's not okay for humans, it's not okay for bees. And we don't want to travel in hot conditions or in congestion or have lots of delays with our travel. So we don't want bees to have to go through that either.
Das, here's some facts for you. Bees actually have 4 wings, the 2 on each side, hooked together to form one larger pair when they fly, which helps them when they're doing those long-distance trips.
They also have surprisingly smelly feet, Jo.
OK, what?
Well, their little feet leave behind a scent that bees can pick up so they can avoid flowers that have already been visited by another bee.
That is amazing. And smelly feet aside, the best thing about bees is honey. Honey is chock full of antioxidants and is a great natural immunity booster. And here's Heinzie in GQ on supporting our kids' immunities against the inevitable runny noses and coughs that come with the winter cold.
I'm glad you're here today, GQ, because we are talking all things kids' immune health. Now, you think us adults have it bad, where we catch anywhere between 2 to 4 colds per year. But kids have us covered because they catch as many as 5 to 10 per year.
I have 3 daughters, Heinzie, and 5 grandsons, so I'm well versed into looking after unwell little ones. One way to support their immune health is to turn to antioxidants like vitamin C. This well-known nutrient assists in reducing free radical damage to cells and helps relieve the severity of common cold symptoms.
Thankfully, vitamin C can be found in loads of different foods, in particular citrus fruits such as oranges and cruciferous vegetables such as broccoli. This super nutrient also helps reduce the duration of the common cold.
Western herbal medicine also delivers relief too. Elderberry from the Sambucus tree may help in clearing respiratory tract mucus. And Echinacea from the daisy family is known for helping to treat and prevent common cold symptoms.
Sounds like there's so many options out there to get the kids out of bed and back into the playground.
And available in supplement form in a pleasant tasting berry and watermelon flavour for even the fussiest of eaters.
Love your work as always, GQ, but I reckon we wrap this chat up and relive our youth.
Lucky I've got a working with children permit.
The A to Z of Vitamins is brought to you by Bioceuticals Armour Force for Juniors, found exclusively behind the counter. Speak to your healthcare professional for specially formulated relief.
Beauty lovers can be creatures of habit, and we have those brands that we naturally navigate to. However, these brands have the responsibility to evolve as we do. Nowadays, our values support naturally derived ingredients and reducing the impact on our planet. Hair care brand Batiste has listened and actioned. The new Batiste Naturally Dry Shampoo range uses nature's best to gently refresh the hair without water. It's made with 100% natural extracts and 0% dyes and sulfates. The finish is lightweight and totally invisible, so it complements any hairstyle or any hair care routine. Fabulous hair does not come at the cost of the environment, and the magic ingredient here that we're talking about is rice starch. It actually absorbs all the excess oils without stripping the inner moisture of your hair. This results in less hair washing, so therefore saving more water. The Batiste packaging is also recyclable. Knowing that you're using a beauty brand that aligns with what's important to you and gives you a good hair care day, well, that's a match made in hair care heaven.
That was Jade with her ally for clean feeling hair without a drop of water in sight.
Now, Joe, I know you're not a fan of the beach and a lot of other things that people normally take pleasure out of. What about a pool? Do you like swimming in a pool?
No, I like the sea. I just don't like the sand. And no, I don't go in pools either. I don't like swimming. But what I do love when I am at the pool is watching the high dive, because there's absolutely no way I could do it. I'm terrified of heights, part of everything else. But I cannot believe how people can jump off, like dive properly headfirst off a springboard. It's spectacular.
It is brave, and I agree with you there, Joe. It's remarkable to see people do that. The 2022 Commonwealth Games kicks off in Birmingham in a couple of months' time. Can't believe that's come around as quickly as it has. And one of my favourite events is always the diving, Joe.
Oh, it is spectacular. Although watching them dive off the platforms up to 10 metres above the water is absolutely terrifying. And when they go backwards and you think they're going to bump their head, I can't.
Just like how we dominate in the pool in swimming, Australia's produced a stack of star divers as well. There's the 2008 Olympic champion Matthew Mitchell, along with Jenny Dennett and Ludi Wiggins, who both dive in 4 Olympic Games for Australia. Then
there's the incomparable Melissa Wu. The diving superstar began competing internationally aged just 13. She became the youngest Aussie to win an Olympic diving medal in Beijing 2008.
Melissa now has her sights set on the Birmingham Games and hopefully the 2024 Olympics in Paris. And we caught up with the diving powerhouse to find out how she keeps a spring in her step on and off the platform.
My sister was a swimmer. She was quite good when she was young, so we spent a lot of time around the swimming pool, and she raced a lot at Sydney Olympic Park. So we went to watch her on the weekends, and that's where I first saw diving, and I was just amazed by it from the second I saw it, and I wanted to start. I started diving in Sydney, and then I moved with my family to the Gold Coast and then to Brisbane when I was around 11, 12-ish. So then from 12 to 13, that was a bit of a really fast incline, and I got into an elite squad in Brisbane, got to train with the divers that had just come back and won medals from the Athens Olympics, and that's when I really started taking it seriously and put my head down and made the goal of making Commonwealth Games at 13, and I managed to do it. for years and years. So I was obsessed with Beijing and going to the Olympics, and my whole room was covered in, you know, Olympic sort of memorabilia and everything, and I really wanted to do it. So being able to actually make that team was amazing for me. I was really, really excited, and I had my family go and watch. So I'm half Chinese, so I had my dad and my grandpa and my sister there, and that was really special. And it was cool because it was my first games, but at the same time I had a bit more pressure on me than my first Commonwealth Games. So I did find that a little bit challenging as well, and they kept me on a pretty tight leash. So winning the medal I was really happy, but also a bit of relief as well when I actually hit that goal. And it was a goal that I had, but also my coaches and the program and everything too.
And here we are, Melissa Wu, the queen of the 10-metre platform, forward 3.5 somersaults pike.
Oh, she does it again.
I've had stress fractures in my back, I've got disc bulge, I've got a few back injuries, but it's just about sort of managing it. I don't have anything major at the moment, but there's a lot of niggles that are always there in the background. I'm always just mindful of, and I think it's taken me a while to learn to manage them, but I've been lucky to find a really good physio who's helped me out a lot with that, and she's sort of found that they're all connected in certain ways and got me a lot stronger. And I think one of the things that she's really helped me with is just that you become so over-specialised in your sport that often the injuries you accumulate just from doing the same movements over and over. So it's almost like we focus on doing the opposite sort of movements and strengthening the opposing muscle groups, and that's helped me to get stronger but also prevent further injuries and manage the injuries that I have better. I did find it difficult at a young age to fit in with the group that I was with. It was a lot of older members of the squad, and we would go to international competitions, and I found it hard to relate to them. And I think too the program was it wasn't a great environment, and we were sort of pitted against each other quite a bit as well. So I think that played a big part too. But I think then for me the motivation then to go and compete and achieve my diving goals was when I got to go overseas and meet other athletes my own age, and that was a pretty cool experience to be like, okay, there's people just like me from other countries that are, you know, diving and putting everything into it and making all these sacrifices with school and other things. And then they were friends that I've just had, you know, they've been my lifelong friends now, and that was a bit of a turning point for me when I felt like it was all worth it, all the hours I was putting in and feeling that I didn't necessarily have people to relate to. I finally sort of found my people, and it made me, I think, fall in love with the sport even more.
Oh, and there it is. Oh my gosh, we might get some 10s from her.
Surely a 10 from the judges in that dive.
Mindset's been a huge thing for me, and it has been, yes, to do with performance and being a performer, but I feel like that is all sort of wrapped up in mental health and how you're feeling about yourself, your confidence, your self-belief. So when I started working with my psychologist, we actually just kind of stripped everything back and worked on me as a person first and got me feeling better about myself, more confident, and I found that sort of translated over the diving, and that's when I started to see improvements in my performance as well. But it is something that I feel like I have to work at a lot, and you can get a bit complacent sometimes and think, oh, I've done it, now I'm good. But it's like training. We come here and we keep training physically over and over again, and I really feel like mindset is the same thing. You've got to keep training and you can't just stop, otherwise you sort of lose it as well. Losing my sister Kirsten was really, really hard for me and my whole family. I think it's a thing that I don't feel like it gets better with time. It's almost harder because it's longer since you've seen the person, and that's something that we still sort of struggle to deal with, I think, and sometimes are harder than others. But I think for me, having diving and something to focus on really helped me through that period. Because at that point, I didn't really think about diving necessarily and leaving the sport, but I just literally in the morning when I got up, I didn't know how to keep going with life. I didn't want to do anything. So it wasn't necessarily just diving, it was just everything. She really taught me that you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or the day after. So just live in the moment and don't leave anything, you know, out there. Just give 100% to every day, and then gradually you move forward and you learn from it. COVID was probably a good and bad thing for me. It was good in that I had a bit of extra time to actually prepare for competition, because I was actually really injured in 2020, so I wasn't really going to get any competitions in before Olympic trials. And even though I was struggling physically, I was also really struggling mentally, and I wasn't really confident that I would have to just go into an Olympic trials having not competed for about a year and then try and make the team. So I actually started off pretty bad. I had a few really bad comps, and I was actually glad that happened, because it kind of gave me that kick up the butt to really get on top of my mindset. And then I basically just, gave it everything, and I sort of had this plan of this is how long I've got to trials, this is how long to Olympics, and I think that was the thing that sort of, got me through trials, but then also helped me get that really good result in Tokyo. No athlete can achieve an Olympic medal on their own, and that medal, I think, for me, symbolised everybody that helped me get there. And so that moment on the dais was just such an incredible feeling.
important at every stage of life, but it's essential in childhood when kids are growing and developing. Eating the right foods and absorbing nutrients is key, but every parent knows getting children to eat healthy is not always a walk in the park. A lot of kids are fussy eaters or have food allergies or intolerances. But the good news is we can complement a healthy, well-balanced diet with supplementation, which is specifically created with kids' general health and well-being in mind. There's many available, but how do we choose the right one? Specialists in children's health, Pentavite, know that children enjoy taking vitamins in the form of gummies. Their range is without any artificial colours, flavours or sweeteners. It uses comprehensive formulations to support kids' health at different times. This includes a multivitamin for general health, a daily calcium with vitamin D supplement to support strong bones and healthy teeth, or an immune support supplement in the lead up to winter. We all want our kids to have the best and healthiest life possible. Making sure they eat a nutritious and balanced diet and encouraging them to move their bodies is crucial to their future well-being.
Well, Darcy, we've said it before, it's a tough gig being a parent.
Jo, I always describe it as a thing that you want to be the best at of anything in your life, but there's no playbook or no way to measure it. It's definitely the hardest job in the world, no doubt about it, but I think being a teenager is no walk in the park either.
Oh, it's so hard. It can be really confronting to have to tell your GP about a health problem when you're an adult, but remember trying to ask your doctor about something that was bothering you when you were a teenager? Oh, those years are so awkward.
At least these days you can ask Dr. Google, which I know you probably shouldn't do because you tend to get to the worst possible scenario at times, but
yeah,
it is a bit tricky.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to Dr. Google, but, you know, you have those really difficult topics like getting your period or broaching contraception with your parents or a doctor and social anxiety. I mean, it's all wrapped up in a confusing mess of hormones and pimples. So many pimples, Darcy.
There's so many cures out there, everything from vinegar and tea tree oil to eating less dairy and greasy foods.
Well, acne is uncomfortable at any age and it seems to be happening even younger, before some kids even hit puberty. And we checked in with an expert dermatologist to find out why and what to do when acne rears its ugly head.
The age group that we're talking about when we're really thinking about prepubescent acne would be anywhere from, say, as young as 6 or 7 years old until about 11 or 12 years old. We're actually seeing prepubescent acne occurring more frequently at an earlier age. Young girls are going or entering puberty at least 1 to 2 years earlier than they did, say, 20 or 30 years ago. So we see it more commonly in young girls than in young boys. And this probably relates to the adrenal glands, which sit just above our kidneys, getting into action a little bit earlier on, releasing small amounts of hormone. There are many myths out there. For example, the idea that acne indicates that the patient is dirty or unhygienic in any way, isn't washing their face enough, or is consuming all the wrong foods. What we know is that acne is a very genetically determined condition. I think the first signs that people will notice is a slight change in the texture of the skin, and the forehead is probably the most common site affected. You might notice just little bumps appearing that weren't there before. They can be skin coloured, or on the more severe end of the spectrum, they may actually be inflamed. We call these papules as dermatologists, and that just means red spots or blemishes. And that's the sign that the immune system has come in and is starting to attack the oil glands that are working in over time. The skin might just seem a bit oilier or a bit shinier as well. When prepubescent acne is missed and is allowed to progress into, full-blown teenage acne or even acne that persists in the 20s and 30s, there's a much higher risk of scarring. So what we really want to do is recognise it early and get the appropriate treatment for that patient at an earlier age. There are certain ingredients that we look for as dermatologists that we know have been proven to help with acne. And certainly the first one of these are to do with unblocking these blocked oil glands. We call them keratolytics. And they include ingredients such as alpha hydroxy acids, AHAs, and beta hydroxy acids, or BHAs. And salicylic acid is probably the most common BHA that we know. Moisturising is important in acne. It's also known as what's called a skin barrier problem. So we don't want to overly dry the skin either through use of harsh cleansers or harsh topical therapies. But if the problem persists, it's about actually seeking help from a general practitioner or a specialist dermatologist with regards to prescription medications. And these can be in the form of cream, so you don't always need to go on tablets or other intensive therapies. Young people more and more are looking at themselves on their screens, engaging with young people via various media, and we're seeing that they actually really care about the blemishes that they're now starting to appear. And it's about normalising these changes, acknowledge that what they're going through is really common and that there are many things that can be done to help them and give them some hope.
And how do you stop the kids picking?
It's an absolutely age-old question. How do we stop it? Fidget spinners, I believe, is one of the new age ways of keeping someone's hands busy. But just encouraging them to, keep the hands away from their face. Keeping them clean is really important, and maintaining a good skincare regimen.
Joe, we started today by talking about facial recognition. Some people can pick a face in the crowd with pinpoint accuracy.
And so can some animals. Dogs that have been missing or separated from their owners have no trouble knowing who their people are when they're reunited after years apart. And do you know what actually does? My cat went missing for 5 months.
Really?
And when he was recovered, he wouldn't go near another human. It was pretty much feral at the vet, and then my husband walked in and he ran straight to him, knew exactly who he was after 5 months.
Well, that is a beautiful story, Joe. I love hearing that your cat was able to recognise Darren after 5 months out of the home. I don't think there's any way we could get rid of Dennis, even if we wanted to. He can hear the sound of Beck's car and smell from miles away. It's amazing what animals are able to do. Well, Joe, that's our show for today. Don't miss the Mayhem Lift Out in this weekend's papers.
Tune into the House of Wellness radio show every Sunday with me and Gerald Quigley.
And thanks as always to our great friends at Chemist Warehouse. We'll see you again soon.